everybody, Jane here, and today I'm reviewing Mama's Boy by Dustin Lance Black. This is a memoir from Dustin about, well, a lot of things. So Dustin was raised in a very conservative household, a very conservative Mormon household, by a mother who has pretty severe disabilities. She had polio as a child and lost the use of a lot of her lower body. Around 6 years old, Lance started to realize that he liked boys. And being raised conservative and religious, that was not something that he wanted to pursue. And he had a lot of difficulties coming to terms with who he was. Ultimately, he did, and he was one of the people that fought for marriage rights and took place in the Proposition 8 fights several years ago. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it and I really connected with it. I also was raised Mormon, so there was a lot of things that specifically spoke to me in this book. And I was buddying reading it with a friend, my friend Christina, who also had been raised Mormon and had left the church. So we had a lot to discuss about that part of the book. I will say I was surprised by this book because I thought there would be a lot more conflict between Dustin and the church and Dustin and his mother. And really there wasn't much conflict. A lot of this book is in a way a love story to his mother. So Lance Lance is what people who know him call him. Dustin is what his official name is. So I'm sorry, I may screw up and call him Lance sometimes, like I just did. Dustin really idolizes his mother and all of the amazing things she was able to accomplish despite her disabilities. And she's an amazing, amazing woman. Now, I wasn't expecting as much of her story when I got this book. And at times that did make it drag a little bit because while she is fascinating and it's an interesting history, it just felt like things were moving quite slowly. And this is a fairly thick book. It is 406 pages when you get to the epilogue and stuff. So it's a little bit of a chunky book. Not as chunky as some books, but for me, this is on the larger side. Now, there are a lot of pictures as well, so I mean, it's not as dense as it might seem. Like there's pictures from Dustin's past. But the first 3 chapters, me and Christina both agreed, were kind of slow. It was a slow book to start. Now, once we got past that, we really did enjoy it, both of us. At least as much as she's read. She's still working on it. I did finish it. But I was surprised how much Dustin and his mother were able to get along despite her very conservative views and his being gay. One thing that the church teaches is that family is first and family is forever and family is the most important thing in your world. And different families interpret that differently. Lance's mother, and in fairness, Lance's mother was not completely a hardcore member of the church after a certain point. I also loved in this, going to her, how she was portrayed and her role in the church, the complexities within the church and what is shown, the emphasis on family love, and then also some of the negatives. For instance, Lance's mother at one point is in a abusive relationship, and the leadership of her church are kind of victim blaming. They're like, what are you doing to make your husband hit you? And that to me really touched home. I was never in an abusive household or anything like that, but there is a certain responsibility placed on the women to make and keep a happy home. And there is not necessarily as much discussion as maybe there should be sometimes about men's involvement in that. You know, if you're trying your hardest to be a good wife and things aren't working, that there is a lot of sometimes blame placed on the woman that is not always fully due her. And with Lance's mother, it certainly was not due her. So I really enjoyed seeing that and seeing kind of his complex relationship with the church. In the end, he is very hopeful. I wondered how things would be with this, if it would be negative, because the church has had a lot of, and still is having a lot of difficulties with the LGBTQ community. They just recently did a couple things that I heard about. One was they're opposing the ban on conversion therapy, even though doctors and stuff have said that it is harmful. They're opposing a ban on it because they want people to choose what therapies they want to have. So if you are gay and, you know, don't want to be because the church says you shouldn't be, and you can't get to the highest degrees of heaven if you are, then by golly, you should probably, you know, maybe still think about that. And there was also some very negative words spoken to, I believe, the trans community at the last general conference. The general conference is when the leadership of the church get on TV and talk about things involving the church. And anyway, all of these things are happening, and there's still a whole conversation going on with the Mormon church and the LGBTQIA community. But I was surprised because Lance is a lot more forgiving of the church and a lot more positive about the future of the church than I think a lot of those of us who've left sometimes are. Part of it too is I think his mother, and she really took the teachings of the church that family should be the center of your world in the direction of family should be the center of your world no matter what choices they make or who they are. And I kind of had a different experience personally. So when I left the church, my parents asked me to move out. They tried at first to ban me from Christmas with them because Christmas was a celebration of Jesus and I wasn't part of their church anymore. And also, by the way, I was sleeping with my fiance. And, you know, I was 17 and then turned 18 when all this went down. And it was rough. My transition out of the church was rough. You know, basically your parents being like, you're not going to church and you're in a sexual relationship outside of marriage. You are a terrible person and we don't want that influencing your younger siblings. There is still a lot of tension in my family related to the church. And I was kind of expecting that to be similar in this book, but it really wasn't. Lance and his mother have an amazing relationship. Prior to her son coming out, his mom has a more conservative view about the LGBTQIA community, but then once her son comes to her and is like, Mom, I'm gay, she really pretty quickly turned around and became an ally. And I was really impressed because expecting this book to have a lot more conflict with Dustin and the church and with Dustin and his mom. But really, it didn't. It was more of his story about figuring out who he was, coming to terms with it, especially having been raised Mormon, and the guilt and the feelings and the complexities of that. Kind of unlearning some of the things that he'd been taught growing up, similar things that I'd been taught, and I'm still processing and trying to kind of move away from. This book, I think, I really could enjoy, especially because of my experience as somebody who grew up Mormon. I don't know how... I think this book is very interesting in general, but I'm not sure for people who are outside the LGBTQIA community and or who have never been Mormon. I don't know how much you'll relate to this. I would love to actually, if you've read it, hear your comments if you are not a member of either of those communities, how you felt about this book. Because like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I did feel it was slow in parts, but it was heartwarming. I cried a lot. I really related to it. I loved Lance's mom and the relationship he had with her and who she was as a person. And all the strength she had. He really, I think, shows her as the strength that he drew from a lot. And she is an incredibly strong woman who had overcome so much. And in some ways, I would have liked to go into this with knowing that the story was more about her and with the story being a little more focused on her. Because in the beginning it is, and then it's mostly Lance as he's kind of going through his stuff, and then it's more on them as a combo. So, but I mean, it's a memoir, so it's going to be. It is going to be Lance explaining where he came from, then his story, and then particularly the combination of that and the strength he drew from his mother. So I really just, like I said, I really did enjoy this. But again, I felt especially connected to it because of also being an ex-Mo, an ex-Mormon, somebody who had been raised in the church, had the theological ideas put in my mind, raised to believe certain things, and then as I grew up, kind of stepping away from those boundaries and beliefs. So yeah, this book was inspirational. It was good. I truly, truly enjoyed it. If you read it, just be aware that it's a bit of a slow read, especially in the beginning. The very first 3 chapters were a little bit tough to get through as far as it just seemed like they were taking a while. Then I felt the pace really picked up, and then after Lance comes out, there were several chapters where I felt like things were kind of getting slow again. So maybe some pacing issues. That's really the only thing I can say that I didn't enjoy about this book. Otherwise, I really had a good time with it. I really related to this. And I think if you are, especially if you are ex-Mormon and a member of the LGBTQIA community, you'll really enjoy this. Even if you're just an ex-Mormon, you may really appreciate a lot of the things in this book. So I think that's all I've got to say about Mama's Boy. I do recommend it. If you've read it, I would love to hear what you thought about it. Also below are links to my social media if you would like to connect with me. Included in those links are a list of my books. I write romances, so if you would like to check me out, feel free to do so. If you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe, and if you enjoyed this, please hit like. Talk to you next time. Bye.